Alright, the first part of doing a carb tune obviously is to get access to the carbs. So we got to take off the air cleaner box here and get access to the front of each carb, or the plate of each carb. To do that, I'm going to remove this fuel line, so hopefully if your car has been sitting for a couple days, you won't have that much fuel pressure in and it won't leak that much out. But go ahead and just remove this flathead screwdriver bit here on the clamp, take that off, and then put a rag underneath it so you don't have much fuel dripping down. And then remove this air cleaner box. Just get yourself an adjustable wrench here, and there's two square drive bolts that go through the air cleaner box. Okay, once you get the air filter box off, there's these two plates here. There's front one, it's actually labeled front and back here. The front one has the mounting bolt on the bottom, and the back one has the mounting bolt here for the box, the air cleaner box, on the top. And then there's two bolts here that go through to keep those on, and so I'll remove those next. Okay, the two mounting bolts here are 1/2 inch, and on the back side there's this plate here. I think it's just some type of holding plate. It's a metal bracket, and so make sure that doesn't fall off. You can catch that, and that doesn't, you don't lose it. Then you can pull these bolts through and take them off, and I'm just going to reattach them here into this plate so I don't lose them, and I know where they go. And I'll keep this one separate from the back one. I don't know if they're different sizes or not. Okay, this front plate does come off after you get those two bolts off. You might have to hit it with a rubber mallet or something just slightly, and it might be stuck on with this gasket. There's a gasket underneath there. You can find these gaskets online, so I wouldn't recommend reusing it. Just get a new one. Alright, to synchronize the carburetors you need a tool such as this. You can find them on eBay or Amazon, or probably at some better auto parts stores. And that's why you need to take that plate off, because this needs to seal against the throttle body or the carburetor intake here. Alright, so in order to here's the carburetor. I got a close-up shot here to try to explain some of the parts and pieces. One, because I was thoroughly confused looking at the shop manual and trying to figure out what all of the parts and pieces were to the carb, and watching John Twist's videos about adjusting the carburetor, and him doing a HIF carburetor and me having HS carburetors. It was just the whole thing was confusing, and the shop manuals, the photos in the shop manual didn't do it any justice. So hopefully this will help explain some more. So we got the adjustment screws, two of them. Here is the idle adjustment right here. I'm pointing to you up top, and it's just to the aft side of the carburetor, aft inner on both sides. And then down here, I'm pointing to it right now, there's another screw. You have to get back behind it to adjust it, and it's a real pain in the butt to get back there to adjust that one. But that is the high speed, high idle adjustment, or I think sometimes referred to as the choke idle adjustment. And so that one is a bear to get to. Here is the normal, the slow speed idle adjustment right here. So some more of these parts and pieces. The manual will tell you that you have to check this cam right here. There's a cam right here, this sloped edge, or this radiused edge that meets and engages with this high speed idle screw right here. So when that cam turns, you can see that get the light, it moves and eventually will make contact with that high-speed idle screw. See how it's engaging right there? So in the process of adjusting all this, the book will tell you to let me get this light stabilized here. The book will tell you to open the choke. I think it says 5/16 of an inch. Not 5/16 of an inch. Let me find that spec so I'm not speaking out of turn here. Okay, so yeah, it says with the fast idle cam against its return stop, check that a 1.6 millimeter, 1/16 of an inch free movement of the mixture control choke cable exists before the cable moves the cam. So down here, I'm pulling up on the choke arm here. That when you pull the choke, it engages this arm down here. I'll show you what I'm pulling on. Right there, here's the choke cable right here, and it goes through, and when you pull on the choke cable inside the car, it turns this lever right here, or it turns this pin, which turns this cam. So when the choke is pulled, this pin that goes between the two carbs is rotated, and that cam, which is right here again, right here, this cam right here turns and eventually makes contact with the fast idle screw. So you only want 1/16 of an inch, so before it moves. So you want to make sure the fast idle cam is against its return stop, okay, which is all the way down, and then you want to move it 1/16 of an inch. So basically that much, and that's all the free play you should have. And then hopefully, yep, you can see it barely just engage that fast idle screw. If you can make out the slight amount of movement on that fast idle screw right back here, you'll see this piece right here start to move. Is the free play, and then it starts to move. And that might be slightly more than 1/16 of an inch. So I could adjust these screws in the back to get less free play before that cam hits. Now another thing you want to check is that both cams are moving at the same exact time. So in here you have this lever right here, which is engaged by this cam on the aft side, and then here's the cam on the front side with this lever. And then when I move this, you want to make sure that both of them are being engaged at the same time. And it's hard to make out that the right one is moving right there, you can kind of see it twisting. In the back here, you can make out the movement back here of this lever arm. So you want to take out the free play. So that's 1/16 of an inch of movement. So right there, and then movement of the actual, or engagement of the cams. And you want to make sure that they both engage at the same exact time, which they are pretty close. I mean, close enough that I can't tell a difference. So those are the parts. Again, the cam, the fast idle back here, which is hard to get to. You have to reach underneath and around to engage it from the back side. The slow idle screw up here on the top. And then this here for the choke is where you want to check the free play. Alright, now another part that you need to know or be familiar with is the jet lock nut here. So underneath each of the carbs is this jet lock nut right here. So that is what you need to turn right here. There's a spring and then the jet lock nut, and then below there is so this is just the jet housing right here, and then so right here you'll need to adjust this nut. Let's see if I can focus in on it. So you need to adjust this nut right here in order to, that's the mixture adjustment. And on the other side you can see back here right on the top, just follow that red up, and then that nut's right up here. Okay, one last piece to be concerned with. Also, just like when you are adjusting the, or making sure that both cams that attach to the fast idle or engage the fast idle screws engage at the same time, you also want to make sure that each of the mixture, so each of these jet tubes lower at the same exact time as you turn the choke, or engage the choke cable. So I want to make sure that both of these move the exact same time, and the front one's blurry obviously, but you can kind of see the one in the background moves right there, and the one in the foreground I can see kind of moving in the blurriness right there. So that's another thing to check, to make sure that those arms engage, and those arms, those are engaged via let me see if I can get it in the picture. Right on the back one that is in focus, there's an arm that comes down right here and engages that. So right now it's not in focus. Okay, right there, there's the arm that comes down. Here. There it goes, focused. So here's the adjustment nut right here, and then the arm comes down here. You can see it in the background, right up there, that angled arm, and it comes down and it attaches on here with this screw. and that comes down from this top cam here. It's attached right back here. Up onto this. It's kind of part of this cam piece. Okay, if for some reason your the two jet tubes are not falling away from the carb at the same time, you can adjust that with these screws here, or these nuts. So these nuts right here, you loosen these nuts, and then you can rotate this piece on the tube, and that will bring the cam closer to the fast idle, but it also moves this pin back here, and that pin back there is what moves or is attached to the jet tube. So back there, see that tube, that pin right back there, as it starts to move, that pushes down on the jet tube and increases the fuel into the mixture. So right here, those nuts, turn those or loosen those up, and then rotate this one back, and it'll engage that pin earlier. So if they're not in sequence or in sync, then that's how you adjust that. After you do that, though, you might have to adjust the high idle or the fast idle screws in order to get them to engage at the same time, because that'll also move the cam right here, which will engage at a different time with this fast idle screw. They should both be the same. So you can see here, as you look down at this screw or this nut here on this side and this nut on this side, they should both be pointing in the same direction. So you can look at them dead on, and they should both be pointing you in the eye at the same time, so that they both are the same. So if you have one that's this way, but the other one, the nut is on top, then that's not probably correct, and you need to make some adjustments. Alright, so let's start the tuning process now that we've gotten through some of the identification of the parts and pieces. I went ahead and I made up this carb tuning sheet. I kind of pilfered some of the information off of SU Carburetor.co.uk, I think. Mostly because the pictures in the shop manual I have are poor and I couldn't see everything. So I printed this out so that I would be able to figure out where it's all at, where everything's at, and bear in mind I am learning as I'm going along. So talks about some general stuff, parts description, and then making sure of a couple things. One, before you actually start tuning the carburetors, that the engine's warmed up. But goes through the process here, and I'm going to go through it with you. So it says to remove the air cleaners, which I've already done, obviously. Checking the throttle for correct operation and signs of sticking. So you can do that right here on the car, in the engine. So make sure there's no free play or no sticking, and it's not binding at all, and that the cable is running smoothly. So all that looks good. Unscrew the throttle adjusting screw until it's just clear of the throttle lever with the throttle closed, and then turn the screw 1.5 turns clockwise. So here's what we're looking at here: the throttle adjusting screw, which is on the back side, and which I identified earlier. It's also up here in this picture right here, and you're looking for the clearance in here that I've identified with the red arrow. Let's see if that'll focus. you're trying to make sure that clearance right there, you unscrew it so that is it's clear of that screw, or it's clear of that plate, and then you turn it 1.5 full turns. So I'm going to try to get that on camera and see if I can get a close-up of that inside of the engine. I'm not sure if my camera will actually get that, but we'll give it a shot. Alright, so these the adjustment screws are a 1/4, by the way. You might find it easier to do these adjustments with a 1/4 inch socket. So what they're talking about is the 1.5 turns. You want to unscrew this until this plate. What they're talking about with this adjustment screw and making sure that it's let me read it again for you. Unscrew the throttle adjusting screw. So this throttle adjusting screw right here until it is just clear of the throttle lever with the throttle closed. So the throttle's closed, the throttle is closed, and so you want it to be just clear of the throttle lever. The throttle lever is right down here where it engages. This a little bit of space in there, or what you want is the tiniest bit of space, so it's just clear of that lever. So you unscrew it, or you screw it in until you see it start to move. So I just started to see movement in that lever, and it's hard to see. It's very hard to pick out, but if you look at it at the right angle, you can just barely start to see movement right there. You might not be able to pick it out with the camera, but I can just start to see movement. So you want to back it off until it's just clear of that. Now if I could get my eyes under there, you'd be able to see the screw engaging this plate here, but I can't get a good picture of that on the I can't get a good picture of that on the camera. Okay, so what I was able to do here is I got a piece of paper and I stuck it underneath. I unscrewed the adjustment screw, stuck the piece of paper underneath, and I'm going to slowly back off of the adjustment screw until I can remove that piece of paper, and that'll tell me when I'm clear. So here I got my adjustment screw in there, and I'll try to not get my hand in the shot, but I'm going to pull slightly on this adjustment, or this piece of paper, until, there we go, I can remove it. So that's how you can figure out when you're clear. Now you kind of make that as a reference point, and I'll just eyeball it now and see if I can see it moving. So there's, yep, I can just barely see it moving, so it's good right now. Now I want to turn it 1.5 full turns clockwise, 1.5 turns. So I got my screw in there now so I can see when it's 1.5 turns. So 1/2, 2 halves, and 3 halves. There we go. So that's 1.5 turns. That's 1.5 turns down, and I'll do the same thing on the other side. Alright, now that I got that step done, the next step is to raise the piston of each carburetor with the lifting pin and check that it falls freely. So the lifting pins are here. They're on the outside of each of the carbs. So here you can see right here is the lifting pin. So if I get my finger down in there, you'll see that I can lift it up. And when I do that, I'm raising the piston. And when I release on that pin, I want the piston to fall back down. And you want it to fall freely on the bridge. So in there, there's a bridge in there. You want it to fall freely on the bridge. You don't want it to stick up or hang or anything. So you can see it's coming up and it falls back down freely. And it says if the piston shows any tendency to stick, the carburetor must be serviced. So I'll do that. I'll check both sides, make sure they fall freely. Okay, and here's a picture of the aft lifting pin. It's back here, right down here. Okay, now what they're telling you to do here is to lift the pin so that the let me read it again. Lift and support the piston clear of the bridge so that the jet is visible. Okay, so I got my handy dandy endoscope camera, and now you can see the jet is visible. Now what we're looking at there is that the gold colored ring around the center pin, a jet needle, and that's what you want to, that's what you're looking at there, that gold color ring. Okay, so we'll keep an eye on that, and then I'll read the rest of it. If that is not possible due to the installed position of the carburetor, remove the suction chamber. So you might have to remove the suction chamber in order to do this. If you don't have an endoscope, you likely will have to, because it's hard to get a view on that thing unless you have a camera down there. So turn the jet adjusting nut up anti-clockwise until the jet is flush with the bridge, or as high as possible without exceeding the bridge height. Okay, so you can see the jet there is, you want it to be flush with the bridge. So I'm going to go ahead and try to turn this while I got this thing recorded, and hold the up the piston at the same time. And I'll see if I can be ambidextrous enough to do that and get it all on film. Okay, so the part you're looking at here on the inside is that jet that's coming up and down right now. So right now I'm not turning the screw, I'm just pulling the jet away with my hand so you can see the movement of what part we're talking about. We're not talking about the outer gold part. Talking about the inner part, and you want that to be flush. So you can see right now I got it adjusted too high up because it's so it's sitting proud of what they refer to in here as the bridge. So I need to adjust it down a little bit to be level with the bridge. So I'm going to turn the adjusting nut, and you can see hopefully it's kind of backing away. There we go. So that's pretty close to level right there, at least it looks like. Maybe a little bit down. Alright, if you don't have an endoscope, you can pop off the vacuum chamber here. It's 3 flathead screws around the outside, so there was one here, here, and here. And so what we were looking at there on the endoscope was right down in here. That's the jet right there that we were trying to make sure was flush. So if for some reason, it's pretty easy to pop this vacuum chamber off, and then just make sure you don't lose anything or damage the spring in there. And the inner chamber is going to be filled with oil, or at least it should be. So make sure you don't drop it and spill it over. Okay, the next step, it helps to remove that anyway to do the next step, which is down here. We're going to check that the sintered needle guide is flush with the underside of the piston. I mean, you can do that with the endoscope, but it's kind of difficult. I'll show you how to see it with the endoscope. But what we're looking at here is on the underside of the piston. Here's the piston that I removed from, let's see, it goes in like as a guide, or it goes in like so. So I removed that, and hold your finger over the top if you don't want to lose any. But on the bottom side here is, so what we're looking at here is the sintered needle guide is flush, so you don't want this right here, the needle guide, to not be flush with the piston. So right here, there shouldn't be any ridge here between this needle guide and the piston. So that's what we're looking at there, and you want to just make sure that that's flush. So now that that is, you can put the piston back in. Just make sure that you don't it goes straight down, and that the needle goes into the jet there, down just like that. Okay, if you're going to try to do this with the endoscope, you can kind of try to see underneath. It might be difficult here. Hold on. What you're trying to see under there is that the needle guide is flush right there. You can kind of see there's the needle guide, that ring, and it's flush with the piston. So that's good to go on this one. Okay, so the next step is to turn the jet adjusting nut 2 turns down. So that would be clockwise. And when they talk about clockwise and anti-clockwise in this sheet that I got printed up here, they're talking about as you're looking down to the jet. So the jet, as you're looking down upon it, if you had the vacuum chamber off, that when you're looking at it that way, then that's clockwise and anti-clockwise. So I have to turn this nut anti-clockwise as I am looking at it from the bottom. If you're looking at it from the bottom, like on your back on the ground looking up, then it would be turning it anti-clockwise. But looking on it from down from above, it's turning it clockwise. So they want us to turn it 2 turns, so you gotta try to get in there and see the faces of this. There's the face right there pointing at me, kind of. So we know that this is a 6 sides. So we want to go 2 turns, so that's 12 faces. So there's 1 face, 2 faces, and 12. So that's 12 faces there. Now, the jet should be sitting low. If I look at it again, yeah, the jet is now pulled back from the bridge. Okay, the next step is to turn the fast idle adjusting screw anti-clockwise until it's well clear of the cam. So down here, they're asking you to turn the fast idle adjusting screw back here, back here, till it's well clear of this cam, which mine is well clear of the cam already. And that's where it's set up normally. Alright, the next step is to check the piston damper oil level. So we want to top with oil, SA20, or they actually have an actual SU oil that you can buy, until the oil level is just below the top of the hollow piston rod. So inside here, if it'll come out, you can see that inner lip inside there, and that is what they're talking about. So it should be just below the top of that, maybe 1/4 of an inch is what I've heard. So just make sure that both the oil dampers are topped up with the oil. Okay, a good way I've found to top up the oil dampers is just use a tube and a small cap full of your SA20, and just dip the tube down into the cap, and you can just suck a little bit up, then put your finger over the top and hold it as you put the tube down into the oil damper chamber, and then fill it up with oil. Alright, all those steps we performed with the engine cold, which is fine. For the next steps, we're going to have to warm up the engine, get it up to operating temperature. So we'll go ahead and do that now. Make sure that everything is back connected. You have your vacuum chambers completely reinstalled. If you took off the fuel line, make sure you put the fuel line back on and tighten down the clamp. In order to use the choke, this bracket needs to be installed, so you have to have the plate back on here in order to attach this bracket. If you put in the screws through to attach this back plate for the choke, the screws are too long and they'll interact and interfere with the cam back here. So you got to put that front plate on that goes on prior to putting in the air filter. Alright, so I just idled the car for a while, warmed it up to operating temperature, and then the next step says to adjust the throttle adjusting screw until the correct idle speed is obtained. So that's what I did with the setup that I had done previously, i.e. the 1.5 turns on the idle adjusting screw and the 2 turns on the jet the idle speed was pretty high. It wanted to idle around 2,000 RPM, so be prepared for that. If I pulled the choke out obviously to start it because it's a cold day, and then I let the choke in shortly after starting up the car, and the idle wouldn't go down. So be prepared to adjust those idle screws pretty quickly. So I got it about to 800 RPM idle, and so now I can go on to the next step. So, and also I've got my timing light here set up so I can read the idle while I'm out here instead of having to constantly go inside the car and look at the tach. Okay, so you want to adjust the idle screws to get a balance between the two carburetors. So you got the carburetor, and you can see the float is just at the top. So you want them to be balanced. Looks like I need to increase the axle just a little bit. So the next thing you want to do is turn the jet adjusting nut down to enrich or up to weaken until the fastest speed is indicated. The way that was mentioned on the videos from John Twist is you lift up on the piston, and then if the throttle, if the RPMs increase about 50 RPM and then go back down, then you got it set at the correct mixture. If they go up, and if you lift the piston up and the RPMs increase and it stays increased, then you're too rich. And if the car dies immediately or wants to die, then it's too lean. And you can see how the RPM increase and it stays up. That means it's a little too rich, so I'll adjust the mixture. Okay, it still stays up, so I'll just some more. still a little bit too rich. See, the idle is increased as I'm doing that, so I'm going to adjust the idle back down a little bit. Now I can't really tell the idle increasing at all. I'm going to try to lean it out a little bit more. Okay, that time it did it. So the idle went up just a little bit, and then it went back down. So I'll see if I can repeat that. See, the idle went up a little bit. It's hard to tell, but you can kind of hear it with your ear. The idle goes up just a touch, then it goes back down. Okay, I think I finally got it. Yeah, it slightly goes up and then goes back down. Very hard to tell. All right, I'm going to go over the next part with the car off, just because it's easier to explain. So now, once you get the balance set on the idle, then you go and you adjust the balance on the fast idle. So what it says is that you pull the choke out. You'll have to reattach the plate here and reattach this choke bracket. You pull the choke out until the cams are just about to make engagement here with the fast idle screws, and then once you do that, it says to adjust the fast idle screws so that the fast idle is set at. So once you turn the fast idle adjusting screws to it, give the correct fast idle speed. According to the shop manual, fast idle speed is 1,000 RPM. So you just adjust those back screws here that are very hard to get to until you get 1,000 RPM on the fast idle. And also you use your balance gauge here to make sure that they're balanced, and you can adjust each screw individually to make sure to get that improper balance. Once you do that, you're pretty much done with the job. So the carburetor should be fully adjusted, And next we'll just clean it all up. We'll put the plates back on, put the air cleaners back on, and put the air box back together, and that's easy. So I won't show that on the video, but hope this helps somebody. And that's pretty much full carb tune. I didn't take anything apart to actually clean out the insides, but you could do that as well as part of the tune-up. But that's how you inspect and fully tune the carbs per the instruction sheet. I'll post this instruction sheet somewhere online. I'll put a link to it in case anybody wants to see. These pictures are a little bit better than what is available in at least my shop manual. The pictures are really shoddy. So hope that helps. I'll see you in the next video.